David Noyce from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. He's the chair of the Civil Engineering Department, and the University of Wisconsin was one of the co-leads here on hosting the conference. So, welcome, David.
Thank you. All right, good afternoon, everybody. Nice to be here with you all in my home state of Wisconsin. So what I thought about, I knew I'd be following a wonderful presentation from the Wisconsin Department of Transportation. So when I thought about preparing some remarks for you today, I thought, well, maybe we should derive some capacity equations for roundabouts, or maybe get into some Bayesian statistical models for roundabout safety. And I thought probably you wouldn't be overly interested in that right now as you're digesting your lunch. So what I want to do is to hopefully provide you some new knowledge, but also get you to think a little bit as we look to some things we're working on at the University of Wisconsin, and as we think about roundabouts as we move forward here in the future as well. So what I'm going to talk to you a little bit about is some new initiatives we have at the University of Wisconsin related to connected autonomous vehicles, and I think more broadly we'll bring it back together into this concept of roundabouts a little bit, but hopefully you'll find this somewhat thought-provoking and interesting as we go forward. Again, my name is David Noyce. Very nice to be with you here today. So, you know, Wisconsin is known for a lot of things. So part of my initial goal here is to leave you, especially those of you who are from out of town, with some fundamental knowledge of Wisconsin. Right? These are things, I have 3 kids, things you teach your kid from, you know, as soon as they're able to walk on forward here. And number one is you bleed green and gold. So the Packers always, and this is before we teach children that green means go, red means stop. We talk about this kind of stuff. We have cheese here, right? You all know that part. Yes, cheese curds do exist. They exist in the form of fests, and then that's kind of a fun event. And the secretary this morning talked about Greene County. So beer is the other part here that we seem to find time for, and if you haven't had a spotted cow, all names for beer, right? You got to give that a try. But I thought it'd also be interesting to talk about what Wisconsin is known for here, and I'll just take just a couple of quick minutes. And maybe even some of you natives don't know all this stuff. So Wisconsin is known for ice cream sundaes, the first ice cream sundae, and I'm told they're coming out here in just a minute or so. So watch the back doors when they come open. Not getting into politics, but you can decide if this is a good thing or bad thing based on your beliefs. But this is something that started in Wisconsin. The first kindergarten was done in Wisconsin, down in Watertown. Sadly, this is closing. You may have heard that in the news here recently, but Wisconsin started a circus with Ringling Brothers. We still have the first operating radio station down on campus, which is now part of the public radio system. Getting a little bit more into the transportation things, which we're all interested in. So the first automobile race from Green Bay to Madison. How about that? And it took, what does it say there? Only 22 hours. So not a bad walk, drive, right? To make this thing happen. And we've done a lot of things in automobile that we probably don't get a lot of recognition for, especially with Detroit, just one state over, but oops, I hit the wrong button. The four-wheel drive system, some of the voting things, speedometers, highway numbering system actually started in Wisconsin. We have a statewide bikeway, which was the first to complete from side to side, and of course we're back to the Packers going. I told you that's the first thing we do when we do that stuff. But down on campus, very quickly, what keeps our university rolling is vitamin D. What I mean by that, the royalties off of vitamin D are still very strong, and our Alumni Research Foundation is built off of that. And yes, back to the beer. We were the first campus to have beer, and that still exists today, believe it or not. All right, but back to a little bit more serious part. What I wanted to talk to you about is something that we've established at the University of Wisconsin, which is part of a federal USDOT initiative to develop proving grounds for autonomous vehicles. We were fortunate enough to be selected as one of the 10 sites. I'll show you the sites here in just a second. And I can tell you at the University of Wisconsin, in my department, especially with Andy, Bill, and myself from a research standpoint, we're absolutely undefeated in proposals that come with no funding. All right, so we got another no-funded selected proposal, and don't know why that always works that way, but nevertheless it does. So you can see on the map here, we're one of 10 sites, actually very proud of that. To be very, very frank, we didn't think we really had a good chance of becoming one of the 10 sites because of some of the things that we don't have and some of the background and support that some of these other sites do have. But nevertheless, we're very proud and we're moving forward very aggressively in these areas. What many of you may not know is we also have some very wonderful facilities in the state that we are using as part of this Proving Ground initiative. One of them being the MGA Research Facility down in Burlington, Wisconsin. For those of you who may remember the old American Motors Company, and maybe some of you are still driving your Gremlins around here as we leave the site. But that company, as you know, does no longer exist, but the Proving Grounds where they tested the vehicles has become a private facility. And it's a great opportunity for any type of transportation research and testing, but it's certainly related to this as well. And there's roundabout facilities there for us to work with along the way. Similarly, we also have Road America up in Elkhart Lake, which has a number of different events, including a road race that some of you may be familiar with. Also contains roundabouts on the site and has a great testing facility for us in that area. Hopefully, if you're not from this area, you get a chance to migrate to Madison and take a look at the University of Wisconsin campus. It is along the lake, so it makes a very unique transportation system and situation. And yes, indeed, if you look at the one little yellow circle there, we do have a roundabout on campus. And so we have a nice facility for us to evaluate the students to work with, and from time to time we'll collect some data and do some research with that activity as well. So as you can imagine, now trying to tie in some of the things that we're talking about here over the course of the next 2 days related to roundabouts, and then thinking more broadly down the road as we get into this autonomous world, how is all this stuff going to come together? And as you can see by this diagram that we put together, reading all the words probably is less important than just seeing how complex all these inputs are. You know, all the different things that are going to be important for us to think about outside of the traditional design and operation things that we're talking mostly about here today and tomorrow. So we will be thinking broadly, and we want to think about what the future infrastructure of our system is going to look like. Now, for those of you who are familiar with and are thinking as well, like we are, about autonomous transportation and driverless vehicles, there's lots and lots of things that we still don't have good answers to. But this slide is intended to just give you a quick snapshot of all these different things. But clearly we're going to have to look at not only the design issues, but the interaction with different folks. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that here in just a second, as we think about how to better integrate the non-motorized community and the interaction that's all going to take place and help us with here. So what we focus on in our program here is how we're going to bring the technology, which is a key part of this, together, along with some of the more fundamental things, if you will, in terms of the roadway and the infrastructure like we're talking about today, and then the governance of it as well. So it becomes very complex in terms of this interaction, and back to your old traditional Venn diagrams here, of finding that appropriate level of overlap. What are we doing on campus now, along as our research? Well, we're certainly looking at the shared mobility idea, and we hope to be having an autonomous transit vehicle in operation and moving along very, very quickly, so we'll be able to begin to experiment and look at those types of things. The connected vehicle issues you all are aware of, and I won't spend any time thinking about that. But certainly the autonomous vehicles are going to be key to this overall new development that we're talking about. So really what I want you to think about is how this connected and autonomous vehicle comes together. And now let's add to what we're thinking about over the next couple of days. So how is this world of roundabouts and all these things that we're talking about going to interact with this world of connected and autonomous vehicles? Well, let me give you a couple of thoughts about that. Well, certainly from a safety standpoint, both of these initiatives are very safety driven. So there's no question, there's some recent Wisconsin data some federal data as well. And you know, certainly we have regression to the mean and things will flutter from year to year. But generally speaking, we're seeing a little bit of a trend in the wrong direction right now. And those are certainly things that roundabouts and perhaps autonomous vehicles can help us significantly with. There's similar motivations in terms of improving safety, but as well as providing equity and looking at the other motivations related to economics, underutilized, participants in the transportation system, healthcare, agriculture, etc. But what we do know is this, is that AVs are coming, so we have to think about how they handle them. In fact, some would argue that they're here. And you see many examples of not only some of the new vehicle testings that are going on that we all hear about in the media, but in Wisconsin, given the nature of the state, agriculture is huge. And autonomous agricultural vehicles are in operation pretty extensively already, with Case being one of our main manufacturers here in the state. Just as a bit of a sidebar, I don't know how many of you have seen these new autonomous delivery detectors. So they're like a cooler on wheels. So I think it's a pretty interesting concept. We've been testing these, and Wisconsin is a state that just recently approved, if you saw on the news, the ability to use these types of personal delivery devices in the state. So not only vehicles, but we're seeing many of the other technologies start to show up pretty significantly as well. What's interesting about all the things that we're talking about here the next couple of days is so many people are involved, and every major corporation now is involved in thinking about what this future transportation world is going to look like and how we're going to bleed into all this technology and design and concepts that we're talking about. And we also need to think about how to interact and integrate all these different types of technologies. Now you can tell when the University of Wisconsin makes a slide, we put cows in there as our target item here with the LiDAR and cameras and radar. But nevertheless, looking at how these technologies are going to happen, how they're going to work, how they're going to integrate it, is critical to what we're looking at, both in terms of some of the proving ground concepts that I mentioned to you, but in terms of developing the technology to move this forward. These cameras and LiDAR are also critical to navigation to roundabouts, navigation to the transportation system in general. So we need to think a little bit about that and how that's ultimately going to work. Now, you probably have seen some of the possible things that could go wrong, if you will, with the future of autonomous vehicles. There's been numerous articles like this headline that I clipped here about how pedestrians can defeat autonomous vehicles and give it a little jump out, and if it's working correctly, it's going to stop for you. And so the columnists like to write about all the things that could go wrong if that's indeed the case when pedestrians jump out in front of vehicles. But nevertheless, we've been talking about roundabouts and pedestrians for years and years and years, right? And certainly some of the challenges with the visually impaired community as well as pedestrians in general. And certainly there's many positive ways when autonomous vehicles become more commonplace to have positive interactions and the ability to better accommodate pedestrians in some situations without some of the other traffic control and things that have been proposed. So where are we in the process here? For those of you who are familiar with this, you know that we've identified a number of levels here in the development of autonomous vehicles to where level 5 is full autonomy. For the most part, we're not there yet. Some of the technology exists to get us there, but if you think about the Teslas and the Googles and those types of vehicles that we're familiar with, we're still in the middle of the process, but they're coming, and they're coming fast. So I think it's important for us to think about all of that. Now, you've heard about some of the things that have gone wrong with autonomous vehicles. So this is a snapshot of the Tesla crash that I'm sure most of you have heard about. So the sensor technology still isn't foolproof by any means, and that's going to be important to us as we think about roundabouts as well, because some of the sensor technology and the things that the sensors currently need to operate efficiently aren't at that foolproof level, if you will. There's other examples of where the lack of paper markings have put autonomous vehicles, in this particular example, into the center guardrail there, just simply because they lost control of the paper marking in order to move this along. So the old joke is how do you capture an autonomous vehicle? Is you do that, but I mean, to some degree, we're doing the same thing, right? to some degree we're doing the same thing with this type of technology. So you've seen media highlights as well, probably related to this, and the one on the bottom right there is some discussion about a vehicle that actually did get stuck in a roundabout. And the vehicle was confused because of the lack of pavement marking and other activities there. So something that we're going to have to think about as we move forward together in this area. So for the sake of time, I'm going to try and wrap things up here real quick. But we've all seen examples of these crazy designs, right? Where we have roundabouts on top of roundabouts and in roundabouts. And just think of an autonomous vehicle, talk about confusing. This car, I'm not sure exactly what it would do, but it wouldn't do very much, in this type of environment. So federal AV policy continues to grow in this area. NHTSA recently came out with their guidelines in terms of 15 points on different things we need to think about from an autonomous vehicle standpoint. But if you really look carefully, there's a number of them that directly relate to the things that we're talking about here, and that's certainly the safety and some of the legal and ethical issues that go around with this type of design. But clearly number 12, the overall design, is something that we're going to have to think about and how we integrate the future of our infrastructure design with this autonomous world. We have some time, at least if you look at these types of projections here on when autonomous vehicles will be commonplace. I keep hitting the wrong button again there. But you know how the time goes, right? And before you know it, it's going to be here. I know departments of transportation and all of us are thinking along these lines. So I would encourage you, as you think about your conferences and your meetings yet today and all the other things that are happening, on how you can look at the future of roundabouts, infrastructure design in general, and this new world of technology that we're introducing. So what's the future of roadway infrastructure with autonomous vehicles? Who knows? We have a lot of questions to answer. And especially when you think about on the right, some of the experiments now with platooning multiple trucks together. One driver and a whole platoon of tractors behind them. Now, how is that going to work in the traditional roundabout? And how is that going to work in some of the design features that we're ultimately thinking about? So with that in mind, I'm going to stop here. Hopefully that gave you a little bit of a history of Wisconsin, but as well as thinking more broadly about some of the new technologies that were happening. And look forward to visiting with most of you as the conference carries on. Thank you.